from experience, I think the only real advice is being as true to yourself as you can possibly be. When you get into any kind of art wholeheartedly, it takes all precedence. That's your singular focus. And then just stick with it, come hell or high water. I'm really excited that the record has been as well received as it has. I had really no expectations. It was a sort of on a whim idea to go into the studio really quickly over a 3-week period and get this record made and recorded. And it was a lot of fun to do. I really enjoyed getting the Blues Ball guys together and putting those songs, getting the arrangements together and everything. And then also picking the singers and working with them and getting those vocals recorded and everything. And that was a year ago. Finished the record, and then I went back out on the road with Guns N' Roses, and I didn't listen to it because whenever I finish a record, I don't like to dwell on it, especially if it's not going to be released for a long time, because you start to overanalyze it. So it just sort of sat quietly for almost a year, and it finally just comes out.
Can't help about the shape I'm in. I can't sing, I ain't pretty, and my legs are thin. Don't ask me what I think of you. I might not give the answer that you want me to.
The automatic reaction was so positive. Better than anything that I've worked on, for months and months and months. This thing that you just do in a couple weeks and everybody loves it. It's gratifying, I'm having a good time with it, but also it's nice because it was a record that was so much fun to make and paying an homage to all these things that had such a massive influence on me, and being able to revisit those and hopefully do those songs justice and have people respond positively to it and say things like, oh, you're reintroducing those songs to people and introducing it in some cases to people for the first time. I had no idea it was that big a deal. It was just, a fun day at the studio. I really didn't put a lot of thought into the record itself. Like, this was really sort of an off-the-cuff fun thing to do. And I didn't want to overanalyze it, and I didn't want to take it too seriously. So everything was very spontaneous. So whoever the first singer I thought of for each song, obviously I take that seriously, but I didn't want to brood over it too much. It's like that, Brian Johnson, if we could get Brian, I have a feeling this is a great song for him.
I should have quit you a long time ago.
But I didn't know, how Brian was gonna react to it. And then when I called him, he was, I can't do the Brian Johnson drawl the way he does it, but he's, oh, my son, it's my favorite song since, ever since I was, because I don't know Brian's background. I don't know what his history is, from AC/DC and a little bit of Geordie, and that's as far as it goes. But he got really excited because when he was in blues bands when he was a kid and so on and so forth. So we made a date to record in Florida, and he was like a kid in a candy store singing this song. So it worked out. But it was like that with everybody. Beth Hart, Stormy Monday was almost a no-brainer, but the reason I picked Beth was because I was influenced by the Etta James version of that song, so I innately wanted a female to do it. Picking the singers was something that happened over the course of the 2 weeks. It didn't all happen in one night. It was sort of like over a period of days, and I called Beth about it. And she goes, yeah, no, I'd love to do that, but what if we did it in minor instead of major? And so I think we might have played it once or twice that day in the major key, and then I called her that night. So the next day, we went to go transpose it into a minor key, and the day after that, we were first day in the studio. We set up to play the song. I thought we'd run through it a couple times to make sure we're comfortable with all the changes, because what we did was we had a minor progression through the whole song and then it modulated back into major. Beth had shown up at the studio and I didn't know she was there, so she was in this booth and we're setting up to play and she's behind me and I didn't realize it. So we just started to rehearse it and she started singing.
The eagle flies on Friday, and Saturday I go out to play.
And it was a very intense performance from her. And a lot of that having to do with the fact that she just came back from the Jeff Beck Memorial, just that day. So she was, in an emotional state to begin with. And I think we all were reeling from that. So we did this sort of, by the seat of your pants, white knuckle version of it as a band, just making sure we knew where the changes were. And then having that vocal on top of it where she was not knowing where we were going, because we never played it with her before. And that was the only version we ever recorded. Because when she was done, she passed out on the floor and just said, "I'm done, that's it, that's all I got." And then Chris Robinson, so somebody who I have a history with, but I haven't seen or talked to in a really long time. But the Pusher, I was like, man, that would be, I could hear Chris doing that. And I called Chris, he goes, "Oh, that's one of my favorite songs of all time." And that was the key thing, is that each artists related to the song in a personal way, so that in doing it, they really put their heart and soul into it. That's how Demi was with Papa Was a Rolling Stone. I called her up because I wanted a young girl's voice to sing the song, to tell the story of infamous late father, And I met Demi a couple times and hung out with her and stuff. And so I called her and she goes, "Oh my God, that would be amazing." That I relate to that song. There's some songs, stuff in those lyrics that really relate to my personal life and whatnot. And so I went to the studio with her at a place in LA and she just belted it out. It was great. So that was a really key thing, to having thought of the singers and then called them, and then they could relate to the song automatically, and it really worked out.
Is it true what they say that Papa never worked a day in his life? Some bad talks go around town saying Papa had 3 outside children and another wife, and that ain't right.
And fortunately, I've worked with Paul before, so I sort of had a foot in the door to be able to call him up, and he just put a sublime vocal on that song, on Born Under a Bad Sign.
Born under a bad sign. I've been down since I began to crawl.
Mike was a key. I didn't think of anybody else, but he was the right choice to do this. Mike, I have all the respect and admiration for Mike as it is, but I thought of him to do this record because he is the right kind of producer to work with. He doesn't try to force his stamp on anything. He's not trying to impart his own musical visions onto you. You do what you do best, and he will mention something if something's not right or if something could be better. And he does it in a way that is constructive criticism, and you want to actually please him, which doesn't happen for a lot of people. But he just has that right personality. But the other key factor is he's just the best engineer. He knows how to properly record every instrument, especially guitar. He's like one of the last of a dying breed of somebody who knows how to mic a guitar amp, a cabinet properly, and how to get guitar tones and so on. He just knows how to record the band as it is and get the best out of the sounds that we have. And that's Mike. There's a couple R&B songs on there that, back in the Blues Ball day, I think we did Superstitious. Is a Stevie Wonder song, right? Anyway, and so when we got to the point of doing this record, I was like, I love jamming it in the heat of the moment in a club, but I do not want to go and try and record that song. It would just be too cheesy, at this point. It's too much of a cliche. But I would really like to do a Stevie Wonder song, and I thought about it for 2 seconds. I was like, but my favorite all-time Stevie Wonder song is Living for the City, ever since I was 9 years old when that record came out. I thought, I listened to it and I thought, hey, we could try and pull that off. And Tash said he could sing it, and I said, oh, okay, we're gonna do that. So yeah, these songs are more important to me as just being pivotal in my growing up, musically. First saw Magnatone at the Gibson showroom in LA, and Billy Gibbons had turned me on to it. But Richard Fortas is the one that actually had one sent to my house. And so it'd been sitting around, I kept seeing it there, and I never plugged into it, and it was just sitting around. And so when we went to go do the record, I thought, well, I'm gonna use combos for this, because I don't need Marshall stacks or anything. So I took some Fender Deluxes, I took a Fender Twin, an old Fender Twin that I have, the last Dumble that Dumble made before he passed that he did for me. And I had an old Vox that I took, and I had an old Marshall 50 watt. And that Magnatone. So, and I brought some old guitars. I had a 59, and I had that Explorer that you were just talking about, the Leo Scala Explorer. A 335 that I had just picked up from Norm's in LA, a 63 335. A Tele and a Strat, and this is how I was gonna approach this thing. So for each song, I had a different kind of an application, and I would go through these amps. I finally tried the Magnatone, and oh, this sounds really good. So I used it, and I picked a guitar, and we did this song. And then the next song went through the amps, ended up on the Magnatone. Ended up using the Magnatone for the whole pre-production. Then went into the studio and recorded the whole album with the same amp. So that was the Magnatone M80. And that changed everything, because then I went and I swapped out all my Marshalls in the Guns N' Roses rig and swapped them out for Magnatones. And nobody knew, and I did the whole tour with the Magnatones. And so I've been working with them ever since.
You'll see. I got $700.
In this setup, Craig can't do all my controlling for me. I have to do it myself, which is new for me. But because it's all, so much improv is going on that I can't look to him, oh, hey, turn this on, turn that on. You know? So I've got a preamp on the floor, and I've got my wah, and I've got the voice box, but I've also got a Phase 45, and I also have a Vibrolux little thing that I use, and Tube Screamer, which is great because I have a Firebird that's very, very clean, but it sounds really good, so it just needs a little bit of boost to it. I've even been sort of asking myself, how did all this come to pass? How did my roots become so bluesy? And I thought about it, like in the 80s when that was happening, and there was a whole sort of switch to guitar stylings, because you know the 80s was Eddie and Randy, and that this whole movement started, and I was so fixed on this old school sort of blues rock kind of thing. And it stems back when I was a little kid living in England. I was very much steeped in the Who and the Kinks and the Yardbirds. So when I came to America, you know, there was this more broader sort of music landscape, but it was primarily just old sort of British rock and roll and some American, like the Doors and whatnot. But my grandmother on my mom's side saw that I was so into all this British stuff, and she said, well, you know, that's all great, but it all comes from this. And she played me B.B. King for the first time, and I was like 7. And it really moved me because there was a tone to it and a kind of feel to it that was sort of really gets into your soul kind of thing. And I picked up on it really young. And so from that point on, I was exposed to a lot of different stuff from Muddy Waters and like Lightning Hopkins and also a lot of R&B that was happening. Even Barry White was in there, and Funkadelic and Phoebe Snow. Fast forward a bunch of years when I go to pick up guitar, the first guys I listened to were pretty much Eric Clapton and Jimmy Page and Jimi Hendrix and stuff, and that's all sort of very similar to that stuff was B.B. King, right? So it sort of took everything full circle, and I started listening to Freddie King and Albert King and Muddy Waters and Robert Johnson, and so that was where my guitar style was centered. But at the same time, I loved hard rock bands that were bluesy, so I loved like the Stones, I loved Aerosmith, I loved AC/DC, anything that had that sort of old school bluesy rock and roll thing. So that's where it all comes from.